It's June, and our thoughts turn to water, of course, the absence of water, when is it coming, and the fact that, wow, we've already gotten some rain in June, amazing, and the prospects for...
Record rain yesterday in Phoenix.
Well, yeah. This time in June, it's extraordinary. And so, we got a strong El Nino, a strengthening El Nino, and things are looking good. But we've also been in a period of extended drought, and that's not really changed either, so let's keep that in perspective. I'm just going to say a few things about water management in the Cienega Basin, but the way this morning is going to work is we're going to have a great panel of speakers. They're going to talk for like 30 minutes or so. You're going to have ample time for questions specifically about their presentations. Then we are going to have a break during which we're going to do something we're calling our live, work, play kind of polling or exercise, where we're going to invite you to show us on a map where you do what you do in the Cienega watershed. Then we're going to come back for a panel discussion. Now last year, our panel discussion was about mesquite, and it was a really good discussion, in part because we had a great panel, and we had some great questions. But the other thing was that a lot of people had personal experiences that they shared, or they had really kind of broad discussions that involved a variety of people. And it was a respectful exchange of very different ideas about how to manage a resource. And this is a safe place to do that, and it's always been a really neat experience. So I think you have a great opportunity during that panel discussion to really dig deep into the topic of water. So I hope you'll think about, what it is, you might want to share, or you might want to ask the panel about that wasn't specifically mentioned in their topics. So, in terms of water management in the Cienega Basin, my first reaction to that is what water management? Because most of the Cienega Basin is outside the Tucson Active Management Area. How that happened, perhaps one of our panelists, Linda Stitzer, might address that topic, because it's a very interesting AMA boundary that cuts right across a perennial stream segment and leaves out most of the Cienega Basin. Even with the fact that there's really no formal water management, most of the water management in the Cienega Basin seems to me to be intricately tied to land management. The land management is really the framework right now, from my perspective, for water management. The county has spent $64 million trying to protect land in order to protect water-related resources, such as our riparian areas and the endangered species that live in them. The whole process of creating the Las Cienegas National Conservation Area came out of a realization that there were really important species that depend on Cienega Creek, an area, you may not realize that back in the 70s there was a proposed development called Empire City. It was a subdivision of thousands and thousands of people. It was a rezoning that was successfully approved through the Pima County Board of Supervisors that would have placed a whole city in what is now the Empire Ranch headquarters. And that never came to fruition. And in fact, later on, Gulf American sold to Animax. I think Animax was going to use it as the water ranch for the Rosemont mine, and then the county tried to buy it with the flood control tax levy, and that failed miserably because nobody wanted to spend flood control taxes on a place that really didn't have a constituency even. But fortunately, a congressional delegation came in and established Las Cienegas, also to show that there is the possibility of compatible ranching, because that was another big conflict that was going on really across the nation. Cattle 3 in 93 was part of the national framework. There was a lot of discussion about the role of livestock grazing on public lands, and this was, I think, in Representative Colby's mind, an area where it could be demonstrated, perhaps, that ranching had a role on public lands. So anyway, all of this stuff happened, and it was really more related to using the blunt tool of land acquisition, land protection, as a means of protecting water resources. Today, one of the most important decisions that's coming up is regarding the Rosemont mine. And And that Rosemont mine decision on the part of the Corps of Engineers in particular will turn largely on the issue of water. And the same thing for the decision that needs to come from U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. The biological opinion for that is being written right now, rewritten right now. And that has a lot to do with water-dependent endangered species. How will the mine affect those? Can the mine be permitted in a way that will not jeopardize the existence of endangered species? There are two things that just happened recently that are related to federal water management. We very narrowly maintained the protections of the Clean Water Act for intermittent and ephemeral streams. There was a recent court decision not to continue with the review of some of the of a lawsuit that was specifically to address the question of whether or not streams that don't connect directly to the Colorado River merited protection under the Clean Water Act. So for right now, we have the Clean Water Act, and it does extend to waters of what are called waters of the U.S. and the Sonoita Basin. There was also an effort recently by the National Forest Service to pass what they call the groundwater directive that would set a policy for the forests in the United States about whether they would protect the groundwater resources in the forests. And so they went through what they call a rulemaking process, where you go out to the public and say, this is our proposal. And that directive was just recently shut down. That process of continuing the rulemaking, in part because of concerns of Arizona's senators and other Western senators about what should be the policy, if any, for water, especially groundwater on national forests. And part of that was that groundwater directive really came out of Arizona's experience because the forests here realized that they really didn't have any framework, and the state's management system really didn't apply in the forests. And so they tried to explicitly develop a directive through this national rulemaking. That there is a policy that does apply in Arizona already that has some of the elements that are in the national forest groundwater directive. So anyway, that's another thing to watch if you're interested in that issue. One way or the other, it will probably come back. So, water scarce and fleeting. Mostly what we're going to talk about today are aspects of water that you can't see. So we're going to start out the presentations with one from Pima. She's going to introduce what she calls what lies below the ground, how geologic structures can influence the persistence of surface waters. She'll be followed by Dr. Laura Norman, who will talk about surface water runoff. She'll give us a primer for watershed resilience. And a lot of aspects of surface water are hard to see. You can see it raining. If you're lucky, you might get to see it run off for a bit. But she's going to talk about some of the processes that normally we don't see. Gary Hicks will then follow her. Gary will speak to the topic of private water wells and their place in land management and land use and future water planning. And of course, groundwater, you see when it comes out of the tap, for the most part, all the things that are happening down there, who knows what goes on. But Gary does. Gary doesn't. Fortunately. And then Linda Stutzer, who is another panelist of ours, will talk about the most invisible thing of all, laws and policy. Now, there's a saying about ideas that are believed to be real are real in their consequences. And certainly this is true of law and policy. So it's very important that we understand this kind of stuff. So that's our panel for today. I'll introduce each one of them specifically, but please join me in just saying welcome to our panelists. And let's have